So let's welcome the panel right up. We're going to have a panel discussion about some of the disruption notions that were introduced by Michael. I want to welcome Wes Bolsen, who's Business Development and Public Affairs at Cool Planet, up to the stage. Corinna Lathan, who's co-founder and CEO of AnthroTronix. John McFarland, who's Director of Global Insights and Brand Strategy, Global Connected Customer Experience at General Motors. And Hari Nair, who's Managing Director of Global Innovation Center Korea for Kimberly-Clark, who we'll also be seeing later in the afternoon. Hari, thanks so much. So let's just poll the panel here, and it's great to be with all of you. Is disruption something you create or something you anticipate? And let's start at the far end. Hari?
Start with an easy question first. Right? No, I think it's both, John. I'm not trying to cop out of the question. I think it's you have to create it, and you're facing it. And I think, as Bob said this morning, if you don't handle it, if you don't know how to handle it, you'll be extinct pretty soon. Within
an institution, what's the difference between an anticipating disruption kind of presentation, idea, or initiative, and a creating disruption kind of idea, initiative, presentation?
I mean, in large companies that I've worked for, and my current one and former ones, we tend to do a relatively poor job of anticipating them. We think we can create them more. It's more of that we believe in our idea so well that we can try to create the disruption. I think it's hard. It's a bigger challenge, honestly, to try to create the disruption than if you see the threat and try to respond in the right way.
Corinna.
I think it's neither. I think disruption is something that happens when you do the right thing. When you actually see a need, you see a problem that isn't being fixed, and you design a great product or a great solution to do that, and that's the disruption. It happens when you do the right thing.
Give me an example of that.
All right. I'll use a slightly controversial example. Uber. Okay, I mean, I'm not a New Yorker. I hate standing on a street corner trying to hail a cab. I mean, so now I use Uber to hail the cab. I still use a New York cab, okay? So, but you know, that's a problem that needed to be solved. It was ridiculous. You don't know if a taxi shows up and it's not using GPS. That was a problem that needed to be solved, and it has disrupted. I mean, it's a huge disruption. So that's
So that goes back to the sort of biological systems metaphor. Did Edison invent the light bulb, or did the light bulb want to be invented? Is disruption a way in which systems move to collectively solve problems? And really the title of this discussion is Disruption Through Collaboration. Do systems anticipate and respond to disruption, or do individual innovators do it?
Still asking me?
Yep.
All right. Well,
so you brought up Uber because I think it's a great example.
So I think collective disruption is another example is healthcare. In our area, we're working in the area of brain health. So every time you walk into the doctor's office, they take your temperature, your blood pressure. We obsessively track body mass index from the time you're born, but we don't measure brain health. So now we have epidemics like concussion, PTSD, depression, Alzheimer's, and so I think there's a need that needs to be solved. But it needs a disruptive tool, which as an entrepreneur, I'm poised to build those tools. But I can't disrupt the healthcare system unless I partner with those corporations that can take these disruptive tools, aggregate them, and transform an industry.
So that's a great insight. So essentially what you're saying, and part of it made sense, and part of it I think is using old speak, but collectively you're saying that there is a huge healthcare need to define what brain health is, to make it as usable and measurable as the vital signs that we measure now, and that whole industries have been grown up to actually do, that actually don't do much for us today. What we really need is brain health, and defining what that means is going to be the disruptive phenomenon in healthcare from your perspective over the next 10 years.
Yes.
Great. That's great. That's that's exactly where we want to get here. John McFarland.
Yeah, I think you create it. I think you anticipate it, and you also get hit in the back of the head by it without even realizing it sometimes. So in our industry, in the automotive industry, a lot of times it came down to how we defined what business we're in. We defined, are we in goes back to the old railroad examples, are we in mobility? Are we in the car business? Are we in transportation? What is it that we do? And if you limit your viewpoint too much in that area, something like Uber can come and solve a problem and disrupt you without you even realizing it. And you get hit in the back of the head, and then you have to take a step back and reevaluate what business are we truly in and how do we respond accordingly.
Although if you look at the railroads as an example, hit in the back of the head would be a mild description of what happened to them in terms of disruption, in terms of how the transportation system changed. And Lutz basically said that you're really going to be looking for a job in a few months.
A few years.
This morning. So with the hit in the back of the head and the brain health notion in our minds here, what do you plan to do about all that, John?
I haven't updated my resume in a while, so I might be in trouble. I'm relatively unemployable, so could also be in trouble there. No, I think that and Bob has a lot of really good opinions in this area, and I think that.
And he's retired; he can afford to have them.
And he absolutely can.
Yeah,
that's
exactly,
right.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing him at dinner tonight. I think that the way that we look at it is, we for a long time have looked at our business as building cars, for example, right? And that is part of what we do, but it comes down to identifying what are people trying to do? They're trying to move. They're trying to get places. They're trying to move objects, and defining what that means, and actually transforming our business to adapt to what I consider to be a move from an analog world into a digital world. And that's very much what my team does. The metaphor about the island with a bridge back to the mainland, sometimes it feels more like we're on an island with a tripwire, a little high wire back to the mainland. But my group is all about defining what the future of connected cars in a digital world looks like within a big corporation like General Motors that's been building cars for 100 years.
Is the experience, to go back to Porcini's presentation, is the experience of being inside a memorable, very successful General Motors project, product, is that experience migratable to something else, so that even if the car doesn't exist, there are elements of the GM experience, the inside the car experience that would migrate to some other kind of experience and brand and preserve the brand even?
I think it is, and if you look at about 18 years ago, General Motors launched what would be considered a connected car through the OnStar brand. And we did that very much through an incubator model. It was set up as a company within a company. And the idea of adding and delivering services, of adding and delivering software capability in a world around vehicles is an expertise we've been building, and something that is transferable, because it really is around delivering solutions to needs rather than it is about a physical product. And so when you look at this move from an analog world into a digital world, that's something that I believe we're uniquely suited for. And as you continue to look into where transportation is moving, I think it's absolutely transferable.
OnStar is a great example, and it reminds me of a TED conference back in 1995, maybe 94. Where they were rolling out, the GM was a big sponsor of TED in the early days, and they were rolling out the early OnStar cars, and I, with just a TED nobody and not that I'm a TED anybody today, but just a kind of a loudmouth rabble-rouser, I was there and I got a demo in a Cadillac that had an OnStar. And I got in the car, and the traditional GM sales guys were there. You know them, you know all about them, and I won't need to say nothing more. Yes, exactly. And they were there, and they were all excited about OnStar and everything. And OnStar, of course, is way ahead of its time because of the GPS systems that we take for granted nowadays. But I remember he showed me the OnStar, and he said, now, the OnStar system knows where this car is at every moment, and it can track you, so if anything happens, you are secure. And I said to the sales guy, I said, so this would be an absolutely terrible getaway car for a bank robbery. And he looked, he had blood drained from his face. and he said, no, actually, this would be great. It's 400 horsepower, and 0 to 60. And I said, no. I think it would be a really bad getaway car for. And so the technology and the disruption that is represented by what OnStar was about was something I witnessed on his face at that moment. So I'm really glad you brought up that example. Wes Bolsen.
Yeah, I think the disruption side, I mean, along with the Uber example, I mean, Cool Planet was in the group of one of the 50 most disruptive companies, private companies in the world, because of collaboration. What we make are two main products: a drop-in fuel, high-octane gasoline, jet fuel, and diesel fuel from wood chips or corn stalks or renewable sources, and an ag soil amendment, which is what the Edison Award is for, a Cool Terra product. But we have Google as one of the largest shareholders, ConocoPhillips, BP. If you're making a fuel that reduces the dependence on oil, that's a very disruptive product. But the great way of doing it is you come up with the ideas. You have the idea that's very disruptive. If you could reduce our dependence on foreign oil, put money back into rural America, into agriculture, climate change, actually reverse climate change, not mitigate, do it a little bit less, a little bit better, reverse climate change. Those are radical ideas, disruptive ideas if you're in the fuels business. But partnering, collaboration with the BPs, the ConocoPhillips, GE, an investor, and then I say Google, one of the largest shareholders of our company. Big companies don't want to prohibit us from doing what they have trouble doing. Very fast, very innovative, get this stuff to market. Don't let us kill you with our processes and we have to prove everything out, and it would take years and years longer to get to market. They want to embrace that and work with us. So I think disruption is something that comes from a grand idea, but you have to have the financial backing. A lot of people have great ideas, but it takes a lot of money to put a new refinery, which we haven't built in 30 years in the United States, onto the market. That is where disruption, I think, is embraced among Cool Planet, among our products as well.
So you feel like you've benefited from disruption, you're anxious for more, you've had a good helping of it already, and you're back for seconds and thirds.
Yeah, I think the disruption side, global agriculture, we need more food to feed more people. That is a basic idea, and you say, okay, wow, how do you do that? And you say, okay, we have a product that holds on to water and nutrients at the root level. So you could go into very marginal lands in Africa and put this soil amendment in the ground. Climate change, carbon sequestration, you're actually putting carbon back into the soil in a third world country, while at the same time you're feeding them, and while at the same time you're holding on to water and nutrients, fertilizer runoff, water contamination. I mean, there's so many issues as part of this that if we can embrace, I want to be so disruptive that it actually starts solving some problems that we need. The biggest problem in China,
disruptive that it actually starts solving some problems.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope so. At the very least, I hope that. So let me play with you here, Wes, and we're friends. Okay.
We are. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
So soil amendment, right? Now back in Michigan, we used to call that fertilizer. Right? Am I wrong about that? They don't talk that way in Michigan, in fact.
No, that's another state, some south.
Yeah.
The soil amendment, if you're putting carbon back into the soil, you can use less fertilizer. That's very disruptive if your business is about selling fertilizer. If my product can use 50% less fertilizer, and you're a fertilizer company, that's a problem. Or that's an opportunity. It's very disruptive, though, either way you look at it. If you're a fertilizer company and you embrace the idea that this carbon substance goes back into the ground and holds on to fertilizer so it doesn't run off, I say, you know what? I could probably sell that product at fertilizer prices to someone in the industry. Very interesting, because now I have a product I can sell you for fertilizer prices, but I sell half as much fertilizer. My input costs are way lower. Very disruptive as we embrace the fertilizer companies, not look at it as we're trying to destroy half your business. Don't take an oil company and say, we want to put you out of business, which a lot of renewable fuels companies have done. Say, we want to provide you a high-octane additive to your fuel so that you, Mr. Big Fuel Company, who doesn't have good PR right now, can actually provide renewable fuels through your existing infrastructure. You don't have to have new charging stations, new battery stations. The only thing worse than renewable fuels to a fuel company, a liquid fuel company, is a battery. So how do we embrace disruption with people who might hate us, but in the end love us because what we do is sustain their business model and I can't change the whole world and all the infrastructure at once. I can only provide one product, Joe.
McFarland, note to self: get into battery business. Okay, Wes, what's in this here? Can I smell it?
Yeah, it's
Can I
going to have an
smell- yeah.
odorless. I'll give away some of the.
I know you're gonna. Yeah, but I gotta play with it.
I got to
here.
make sure it's odorless.
This is a soil amendment.
This is soil amendment.
This
It's
one,
very
black
microporous.
looking stuff. Yep, great.
It's
Excellent.
like graphite
Yep,
type.
right,
It's going
right,
to hold on to
right,
water, hold
right,
on to nutrients, and you're going to put it in right at the root level.
Right.
Turf management, California drought, 50% reduction in water, and they're meeting all the governor's mandates. City of Thousand Oaks using this, 50% reduction in water. Their turf and their city parks, their city hall is green because of it, and we're using it today in California.
One more, I'll play with you here. When
man.
you walk the aisles at the GOP National Convention
Hey,
or the Democratic National Convention, and you say things like reduce our dependence on foreign oil, that sounds disruptive.
Yes.
But if you say that to people at Google, they go, oh, for heaven's sakes, Wes, that's a bunch of malarkey. There's no such thing as independence from foreign oil. What we need to do is monetize the waste stream. What we need to do is to do something really disruptive and not think of oil and energy sources as having national origins. There's something fundamentally different going on. How do you match the disruption with the sponsor? Because some people love the illusion of disruption more than they love actual disruption.
Sure, and I think you have two different messages. Whether you like the climate change message or not, some of the Democrats may like climate change more than others. Everyone likes jobs. Biomass is local. When we're making this stuff, it's coming from a local source, and jobs are always local. If you're collecting corn stalks or leftover wheat straw or empty fruit bunches or wood chips, it doesn't matter. You're not likely hauling it hundreds or thousands of miles. So you're creating rural America and jobs. Everybody likes jobs. If you're a Republican, you like the ideas of reducing foreign oil or dependence on oil.
But there's no such thing.
It's
as
a
that,
global
right?
market, correct?
Right.
And so there's
So
no
how do you
such thing.
say that to them gently without, or
The
politicians?
Chinese-
And again, there are plenty of Democrats that talk about reducing dependence on
Oil
foreign
comes
oil.
in or out, though. The Chinese are very interested in not having to buy as much fossil energy as they are. So you can say it's a global market, but it's a local purchaser.
Okay.
And so, the Chinese don't want to have to purchase as much. The U.S. wouldn't like to have to purchase as much in a disruptive political environment. And so, I think from a sense of how do you balance that disruption, the disruption is we don't have to have your product, but by the way, we'll buy it on the open market if it competes, and it's climate friendly.
All right, we're getting a sense of just how intense the language is in this sort of disruptive energy business, which really mirrors the media business as well. What I want you to do is the four of you ask each other questions about disruption that are meaningful to either the things that you've heard here at the table or conversations that you've already had. Provoke each other, if you would. Corinna, I'll let you start because actually you look like the most mischievous of all of us here. More the rabbit. You said neither, as I recall. So my first question.
Okay. So all right. So I'll ask a question. I'd like to ask a question around data and how you see data as being disruptive. I'll give you an example. So in the healthcare area, I did a back of the envelope evaluation, and I realized that you generate more data through your smartphone and wearable devices than your doctor probably sees in a year. So if you can access that data and shape it into a meaningful way, which is what we're trying to do through our mobile apps and brain health, then you really have a disruptive industry. So I'd like to throw that back to you guys and say, how do you see data and the concept of data analytics and big data disrupting your industries?
Hari?
Yeah, the consumer. I mean, I'm predominantly in the consumer goods space. I'm amazed with what you guys work on because I worked on laundry detergents and diapers and tissues. So, consumer products rely heavily on market research, analytics, and quantitative data testing.
You're also based in Korea, where there is more aggregate data of consumers than
True.
exists on anywhere else on the planet.
True. I mean, Korea. That's the whole innovation in doing Korea. It's got a variety of factors, but. To get to Corey's question, though, I mean, I think, in our industry, there's an over-reliance on the quantitative data, to be honest, because it's more about behavioral science and ethnography and really understanding human behavior, especially with the kind of dynamics we're seeing today, that if you run a consumer test, you can get an answer that tells you your product's a winner. Bob said it in the focus groups, when you show them a video that works, everybody says yes. But it's when you actually use the product and the user experience is what's really driving that. So I think the data, in a way, that I'm more interested in is the more behavioral data. It's more the observational data. And there is an opportunity, honestly, with where things are headed right now, where we can collect a lot more of those than the traditional survey techniques that we were using in the past, which is what the industry was built on. So I'm a big fan of it, but I tend to kind of be more cautious about the old methodologies because they tend to be biased more than anything to what we want to see versus what the consumer is really seeing.
Noting that Mad Men is in its last season, then, is marketing as a source or a place where data is used less important than, as perhaps Hari says, data describing the problem that's ahead of us, not anticipating what the consumer is going to do today or in the gas station or something like that, but describing a much more complicated problem like what is brain health? I know I'm asking you, John.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, great. Yeah, I think data. We look. Yeah, sorry. At General Motors, we look at it a few ways. In the past, we've had actually limited data when it comes to our products and how people are actually using them. We're changing that dramatically. We're actually putting a 4G LTE connection in every vehicle we sell in the United States beginning in model year 15. We're doing that because, one, we believe it's going to provide a tremendous amount of value to our drivers and customers, but also because it enables us, with customers' consent, because it's all about their choice, right, to collect the data around how they're driving, about, frankly, the way that the engines and the vehicles are performing, and to package that data back to them in a meaningful way. A good example is we're actually this year launching a product that can monitor fuel systems, battery systems, and starter systems and predict and notify you in advance of a failure. And so if your battery is starting to show signs based on our algorithms that it's going to go dead, we'll notify you in advance so you can actually fix your battery or swap it out before you have a problem.
So information for consumers, not about consumers.
Everything we do is information for consumers to make our products better. Now, we do a lot of marketing analytics and real-time adjustments. I also work in the marketing space at GM, but I think the real value of data and analytics in our industry is having access to data that we've never had before to make our products better, to deliver services to customers that change the way they drive and change the way they own vehicles in a way that's never been done. And by doing this, we're also changing the way we innovate. We're putting platforms in our vehicle that we can add capability to 1, 3, 5, 8 years after somebody bought their car. A big problem in the past was that we would build a car. It takes billions of dollars in 8 years to develop a platform. And by the time it makes it to market, the world has changed. Mm-hmm. We're changing that, and we're flipping that model on its head. Data is going to be a big part of that. But I continue to underscore that the collection and use of data has to be done in a way that is completely transparent so people know what type of data you're collecting, and most importantly, what benefit they're getting back as a result of it.
Who has the better data on car use in America right now, John? General Motors or Zipcar?
I think they have different data, is what I would say. Zipcar has a tendency to have a very specific type of customer segment and very specific use cases. So around those customers that use those vehicles, I think they have a tremendous amount of data. As far as ownership and the way things are used every day, the majority of drivers are still driving their own vehicles in most markets. Not all markets. New York's clearly around the world. Shanghai's a good example. Seoul's actually a really good example as well. But I think it's different data.
Mm-hmm. Why didn't GM come up with Zipcar?
Well, I think that a couple of reasons. I think that the idea around shared ownership or shared models, the Uber model even, the idea around mobility versus vehicle, I think is an interesting question. And a lot of the data, a lot of the capabilities weren't in place because we built vehicles, not platforms that were connected that could actually start to reinvent ownership models. And so, if you look at OnStar, we talked a little bit about OnStar. There's a tendency in our industry, because of the capital investment, because of the risk profiles, to sometimes in the past not disrupt ourselves and wait to be disrupted. Bluetooth is a good example, right? OnStar pioneered hands-free calling in a vehicle 18 years ago. Bluetooth came, which enabled you to bring your phone in, connect it to your car, and use your cell phone. We viewed that as a threat initially because we thought that it was going to, basically take away from our revenue stream. Rather than embracing it and fully implementing it, we didn't exactly know what to make of it. And so I think one of the big things that we're doing now is really getting clear on what's a substitute, what's a competitor, who's a partner, and what's our core business. And that's effort that my group specifically in Connected Car, it's really fascinating. Is Google a competitor? Sure. Are they a substitute? Absolutely. Are they a partner? They are. We're part of the Open Automotive Alliance, where we founded it with Google to define what Android in the vehicle looks like in the future.
Interesting.
And so the competitive environment is fascinating, and it requires a different lens, and that's something that we've evolved recently, but is definitely still developing.
Well, thanks for your candor on that lens, because that's really the exact kind of scary, disruptive sort of narrative that's going on in a lot of places. And if it's not going on, then maybe they don't know that they're scared, but they ought to be.
John, can I
Corinna,
ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
to,
Go ahead.
John?
Yeah,
Actually, the couple of examples, and Corey, yours as well. We probably in this panel alone have used the word disruption at least 500 times already. But the two words that I think I'd like to throw out there is business models.
Yeah.
Because I think, Wes, you talked about it, John, you're talking about it, because in the end, why companies struggle with it, I doubt it's because of the technology, because we see the technology, we know how to make those technologies work. It's fundamentally, when you see something counter to the business model that you're in today, we tend to struggle with it.
Yeah.
And I think that the question is, can large companies really invent new business models? I mean, and I'll ask you because, I'm struggling with that question myself.
Yeah.
I'd like to learn from you about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, an area that in my space we're spending a lot of time on. Traditional value creation and capture in the auto industry was build a car, sell a car, service a car. Now it's still build a car, put a platform in place, and find ways to not only make money while you sell the vehicle, but look at the downstream opportunity around creating value and capturing value 1, 3, 10 years after purchase, as well as business to business. And so again, we're putting 4G LTE in our vehicles, and we're making it available across the lineup, no additional cost. We're doing that for a reason, because we see opportunities to partner with other businesses. For example, we're partnering with companies like Progressive Insurance, that if a customer chooses, we can analyze their driving, again, all choice, we can analyze their driving behavior, and if they're viewed as a very safe driver, share that with Progressive, and they can get discounts. Business-to-business opportunity, right? We're doing it as well across the board with how we look at selling data downstream for our vehicles, how you reinvent, frankly, what enterprise value looks like. There's a lot of opportunity in over-the-air updates and reducing warranty costs, reducing repair costs. So when you look at the opportunity across the lens of where value is created across the entire enterprise, and not just in selling the piece of hardware, selling the car, you have the ability to reinvent business models while also still continuing to build and extract value from your core business.
So the answer is yes.
The
You
answer
think
is
big
yes.
companies do have the. All right, I'm going to present I'm going to put two examples on the table here, one for Corey and one for Wes, to see if we can translate some of this into a different business realm. Lutz talked a lot about the last mile issue of cars, that these modules will connect to your house and then they'll take you to some fast lane somewhere. How challenging is and what is the equivalent sort of last mile issue in healthcare, where people who are either not served because of insurance questions or lack of access to healthcare facilities or lack of access to healthcare practitioners like doctors, what is the product or opportunity in creating a kind of last mile service for people in healthcare right now?
Well, I'll answer that from I'll try and answer it two ways. One from our perspective as a small company, but one just observing kind of the healthcare arena. And observing the healthcare arena, I mean, patients have access to their own information. And I think the fact that the FDA shut down 23andMe's ability to give you that information is a travesty of justice. I mean, for them to say that you can have information about who your parents are, which some people found out through 23andMe they were not, to say that that's okay to give you, but you can't know that you have the breast cancer gene. I think that's wrong, and I think that needs to change. So I think that's a big barrier, saying that patients can't access their own information and then use that to help facilitate their own
All right, let me
healthcare.
reconfigure and explore it further.
Yeah.
So a lot of people view the entrance point in healthcare to either when you get sick, okay,
Right.
Or when you need insurance, which is sort of an adjunct to when you get sick, but sometimes you sort of decide to choose a health plan when you're well, which is an entry point. And you're saying that maybe the best entry point is know about your own health in whatever condition that you are, and that's being obstructed by government.
Absolutely. Well, obstructed in some ways, but facilitated in others. I mean, my hope is that the Affordable Care Act is going to be the impetus from shifting us from a healthcare system that treats disease to one that facilitates wellness, so that we have less disease. So we need to shift to that area of wellness. And I think that from a small business perspective, trying to find access points where you can facilitate wellness but still be accepted in the medical industry, that's a big gap right now. So that's the last mile that we're trying to cross as a small
And
business.
it's a much more challenging last mile than Lutz's last mile in transportation, because it's more like a last mile that would be created at maybe a Disney theme park where there's monsters and crazy like whirlpools and wormholes and stuff like that.
Yeah, and just for the record, I mean, I kind of diss the FDA. We actually just spent 2 years working with the FDA to get our suite of mobile medical apps cleared, and so we have a great working relationship with the FDA, and I think they are committed to making this type of information available in a safe way and facilitating the development of mobile medical. So just to put that for the record, I mean, they know we need to change.
As a journalist, I would say though that travesty of justice counts as a diss.
Yes.
For the FDA. So just in my business, that's just what I would say. All right, Wes, you're up, and then we'll get to lunch here. You saw Porcini's presentation, right?
Correct.
And those great little customizable kind of streams for creating beverages that were customizable. Maybe a little bit of Mountain Dew, a little bit of Pepsi, a little bit of Gatorade, that sort of thing. What if a transformation happened in America, or globally even, where, in fact, people's interaction with the energy system was more like that portal, where you basically got up in the morning and you decided, all right, either you choose it or it's chosen for you. Based on what I have to do today, I need the following streams of energy to get me from point A to point B, from sunrise to sunset, and that will be taken from some sort of source, and I'll be billed for it, and that'll be the way my day goes, and either it's transparent or I have some involvement in it. Where do you fit into that world, buddy?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the idea is being able to choose your energy source, and, I think, you flip the light switch and you don't really think about whether that's a coal-fired power plant or a wind turbine that just delivered you that megawatt. From a same way when you squeeze the handle at your gas station, you don't want the consumer to have to think about those choices. In some ways, your question goes towards you don't want to have to think about. You want to say, here's how I want to get from A to B, and here's how I want to do what I want to do. Cool Planet's delivering. There's the two different products. One is growing the food, reducing.
Yeah, let's not talk about the agriculture. Let's talk about the energy side, because I love the agriculture piece.
Yeah.
So do you lobby the utility to basically use your product as an efficiency, as a revenue enhancer for them, or do you lobby the government to basically create mandated percentages of your product in the energy stream?
So I would say right now it's the renewable fuel standard is driving compliance of oil companies and low carbon fuel standards in California, Washington, and Oregon. Say we must reduce the carbon intensity of our fuel, but people don't want to have to make changes. The cars, the internal combustion engines that are being sold today are going to use liquid fuel for a long time. So the magic of all these charging stations showing up, or hydrogen. Let's go to something a little further. magic hydrogen stations show up and everyone, the euphoria of having just water come out your tailpipe. You may want that. That may be nice, but there's a massive infrastructure. And so what, mixing kind of what Bob Lutz was talking about with some of the, Mr. Puccini was, the consumer has a feeling of they want to know they're doing something good for the environment, but they don't want to pay another penny for it either. And you don't really want to have to change their habits that much. And so what we're trying to deliver from an energy side is something where the consumer doesn't have to change their vehicle out to be able to do something good for the
But
environment.
isn't disruption about people's habits changing radically? Isn't it? Suddenly the habit that they had is something their grandparents talked about?
I mean, yeah, disruption can be in, I think, a number of ways. Is if your fuel tank, when you fill it up, actually takes more CO2 out of the atmosphere than driving an all-battery vehicle. It's still pretty disruptive, but you're still putting liquid into that tank. So I think there's massive disruption. I think disruption doesn't have to be so, I have to change everything. I think disruption can be, shifting, your consumer purchase habit to something that's better longer term as well.
Hari, take us out.
Well,
I'm going to put you between us and lunch here.
Well, I mean, I wanted to start with echoing what Corey said after my first response, which is it really starts with the consumer. I mean, so in the end, disruption is about solving a consumer problem that he or she has today and doing it in a way that is just more elegant and just easier. And so the way we look at it is that there's Professor Christensen talks about it, there's a job to be done that consumers have, and if there is a way to actually solve that problem in a different way that has less compensating behaviors, disruption is going to happen. So I think that's the way I would close it out, that if you focus on the consumer, if you figure out what those problems really are, there will be Ubers, there will be Airbnbs, there will be all these other things that are happening that is quote-unquote disruptive, but they're solving consumer problems.
Let's give it up for the panel. Thanks so much. Wes, John, Corey, and Hari. And this afternoon after lunch, Professor Christensen will be here, the apparently scariest guy at this entire gathering, as the Harvard Business School sort of wizard here. But I will say something about, Harvard's taken a bad rap here from Lutz and from some of the other remarks. I was at an event with President Faust of Harvard last week, and she said something particularly powerful and meaningful that I think bears directly on what we're going to be talking about this afternoon, and that is that as she goes around the world, and the discussion was all about the disruptions in higher education, and believe me, the disruptions that they're talking about and thinking about in higher education, make what we're talking about up here seem like basically, inventing the light bulb in terms of clarity and ease of execution and obvious need. And she said something. She travels the world. She sees people who have been educated in the United States and how much they value that education, and that at a time when we are so terrified and disillusioned by our democracy and our sense of what freedom means in America and the American political discourse right now, that the thing that she sees that America has been most successful at exporting, we used to always say it was democracy and freedom, and she reminded me that more people voted for the losing candidate in India, the world's largest democracy, than are registered to vote in the United States. So we don't have democracy all to ourselves anymore, that's for sure. She said that it is this hunger for learning that is an American thing that we've managed to export to the world, and that she sees a positive and powerful future in both higher learning and in terms of innovation and success and prosperity in the world because of this export of this principle and passion for learning that comes from directly our country here in the United States, the institutions that a lot of you represent, and certainly from Harvard University. So with that in mind, I send you all out to lunch, and thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, that was terrific.